Hello and welcome to Tuff Crowd. Thank you for joining me with my Kick to the Noggin HandBuff Paladin deck. So let's just get this out of the way first and foremost. Is this deck good? Are you going to break the meta with it? Are you going to hit Legend? No, and probably not. You are going to get completely ass fucked by Pirate Warrior and Aggro Shaman and the rest of the cancer that's running around on ladder right now having a grand old time. So, with that said, I believe that Mayor Noggenfogger has crazy potential. I think it is a way better card than a lot of the shit legendaries we've gotten in the past, and even some in this expansion. It is way better than something like Archthief. It is way better than Deathwing Deathlord. This is actually something that can be played in some decks. Now, I have a theory that the reason Noggenfogger's stats are so shit, 5-4 for 9, is because Blizzard learned their lesson with Yogg, which is that when you have these crazy RNG swingy cards, they need to be shit. Because if they're good, then people start using them in tournaments, streamers start bitching, Reddit starts bitching, and everyone goes apeshit. And nobody wants that, including me. I didn't want to see people winning with Yogg. I didn't want people in tournaments I competed in winning because of a lucky Yogg. So I'm glad they nerfed it. I don't think they knew when it got printed that it was going to be that good. I don't think they wanted to take any chances with Mayor Noggenfogger, and so they just made his stats completely terrible. They made it so that he absolutely dies to Flame Strike. He's very easy to kill with other AoEs. A lot of AoEs got put in. These bigger 5 damage AoE board clears. Those are the kind of things that I think was on Blizzard's mind when they made Noggenfogger. If he has such shit stats, and we know about his effect, and by the way, I'm comparing him to Yogg, but we know that Noggenfogger is no Yogg, and don't think that I'm even trying to make that comparison in this video. Let's look at a few of the things that Noggenfogger in particular does when he's on the board. Number 1, minions can only attack enemies. They can't do that misdirection thing where your big dude is going to attack your own face. That can't happen. Targeted spells, yeah, absolutely. You're going to hit yourself in the face with that fireball sometimes, but minions will only attack enemy minions or enemy face. Number 2, all minions can bypass taunt. The enemy puts up a big taunt, you have a chance to go around it. It's the same thing on your side with your taunts. And number 3, and this is the biggie for why Noggenfogger has potential in these decks, if you have a board full of dudes, all of those dudes are potential taunts. Let's look at the HandBuff Paladin, and let's look at its goals. Number 1, absolutely no targeted spells. You run mostly dudes, and I run only 2 smugglers runs. Some people run a consecration or 2, which by the way can't get randomized. That's going to hit like a flame strike. Even with Noggenfogger out, it's going to do the same thing. Some people run Peacekeeper, True Silver, which is, I don't like it in the deck, but whatever. If you want to run it, I don't think Noggenfogger is, when Noggenfogger comes out, this is not the kind of card where it's like, oh shit, I'm fucked now because I can't hit with my True Silver champion. I can't hit the thing I want to. That's not really how this deck winds up working. You have a lot of dudes that are big. And an important thing to know about HandBuff is you don't really care about stats on your minions because the buffs add up so quickly and you get into this crazy value range so fast that a minion's text is way more important than its initial stats. So Argent Horse Rider, 2-1 charge. This is excellent in arena. People run it in some aggro, but it's so good in this deck because Divine Shield and charge with a buffed up minion is crazy. You get 2 buffs on this thing and it starts killing a 4 health thing for 3 mana as you drop it, and it's still on the board. That's like using a removal spell. A lot of the things are like that. That's why all these decks run 1 or 2 fight promoters, because you get this thing buffed up twice and it triggers on itself, or you have something bigger on the board that text is so good to draw 2 cards. And by the way, you got a big body too, just because you've been buffing stuff. A lot of the decks run Novice Engineer instead of Loot Hoarder because, yeah, you get that 1 extra attack with Loot Hoarder, but the risk of losing it to like a priest stealing it or some shit happening to it, like you don't want that. You want to draw the card right away. So the stats on the minion are kind of irrelevant. Plus, it has some synergy with Brawn, which is nice when that happens. But the point is, if a Novice Engineer gets buffed up even once, a 2/2 for 2 mana draw card is in a completely different ballpark from a 1/1. Why does Noggenfogger work? Because it's very common for you to have a lot of dudes out on the field at the same time, because as soon as you start to play these big dudes, your opponent is going to see, oh shit, he's got all these 6/6s, 7/7s, he's flooding the board with stuff. I need to get rid of that taunt ASAP that the paladin put up, and I need to just start sending my dragons and my horse shit right at his face to end this game before he gets too much value out of these buffed minions. In the beginning of the game, you're losing, right? You're playing this dude, which is a 1/1. You're playing Novice Engineer or Loot Hoarder. You can play whichever, but it's not good enough to compete in, you know, any kind of serious meta. You're fighting for board control up until about 6, 7, 8. That's when you sort of start to come back. That's when you start to really grab the board, and that's when your opponent says, oh shit, I gotta go face. So in the beginning, when they had control, they're chipping away at your health. They got you down to 15, 20, whatever. And now you put up your desperate taunts, you put up your Tyrion, and Entomb, Sheep, Hex, whatever, and then the rest of the shit comes right at your face and you're fucked. And by the way, on that note, that's why a lot of these big legendaries that we see all the time, they're so powerful, but that's why they suck, is because if you play something big on turn 9 or 10, it needs to do something crazy, because if it doesn't clear the board, have taunt, or just win, or just do something really crazy like Rag, which is basically 8/8 charge, Yogg, whatever. Like, a lot of these cards are good, but you can't play something for that much mana and then survive to the next turn. Like, you're just fucked if you put up something. Like, Nefarian is a good card in theory. Like, draw 2 cards from your opponent's class, you get an 8/8, it's only 9 mana. It's like, oh, that's really not bad. Archthief Rafaam. His stats are a little bit lower, I guess, but the powerful artifact is really, really serious. You can't play any of these cards because it's not doing enough on the turn that you play it, and then they're just going to finish you off. And the Leroy comes out with the Cold Blood, and the Jade Golems go at your face, and they finish you off with the weapon or whatever. Mayor Noggenfogger, when they start going at your face and they see the 2 or 3 big dudes on the field that they ignore because they start sending their dragons at your face, Mayor Noggenfogger turns all of those giant dudes into big potential taunts. What I was actually originally playing with in this deck was Sogarth, because I was sick of seeing Tyrion and whatever and all my taunts. The Dragon Priests, they just run over it with Entomb or Shadow or Death or whatever, and Sogarth does solve that problem a lot. And this is a good card to try in your HandBuff Paladin too, because since it can't be targeted, you buff this thing up a few times, you get this up to 11, 12, 13 health, and it starts hitting for 7, 8, 9, whatever. That is a serious, serious problem that your opponent has to spend a real lot of resources throwing at to even stand a chance. And by that point, you should be running over them with a giant board of other stuff at the same time. So he is very good, but he does not help with people going at your face with stuff like spells and fireballs and Blackwing Corruptors and whatever. Noggenfogger stops all of that. Sogarth is probably better than Noggenfogger, to be honest, but Noggenfogger has that Yoggish trait of being able to pull victory from the most hopeless of situations. It doesn't take much before he starts to survive the things that in other decks make him pretty much useless. It's like, oh, he had an AoE, I guess I'm just dead. you got some stuff on the board, even not taunted, and you put out a big Noggenfogger, and it's like, oh shit, they now have no way to kill you. And they're throwing their shit randomly. With this deck, you are happy to engage in minion combat. You could have that mosh pit all day long because your dudes are bigger, and you're gonna outvalue people in that war all the time. Thank you for making it this far. Let's go over the rest of the deck. Mean Street Marshal, one of those cards that some people think sucks, some people think it's good. I like getting him in the opening hand. You get one buff on him. You have a nice opening minion with some decent stats once it's buffed up. Death Rattle, draw a card. It's still susceptible, though, to the Priest coming in and just stealing it. And then you're fucked with the Death Rattle. But overall, just having two of them, I'm pretty comfortable with this card. It's whatever. If you want to put in Loot Hoarders instead, if you want to put in Alkalite of Pain instead, totally fine. Smugglers Run obligatory. Grime Street Outfitter. Some pros have said that this sucks. I mean, if you're playing this deck, like, it's not a top tier competitive deck, whatever, but to not run this deck in a HandBuff Paladin, not run this card in a HandBuff, it's like, what the fuck are you doing? Like, you're not, go play a Hunter if you want to just buff one thing at a time. Like, I don't get it. Lore Master Cho is an interesting choice. More people have been catching on to this. I have been running it for a while. This is an excellent card in this meta. The reason Cho normally sucks is because of its stats, obviously. Like, it's a 0/4. Who's going to waste time with this in pretty much any deck? It dies to pretty much everything. It stops you from using spells. Well, in this deck, where you have two Smugglers runs, and that's it. And let's say you have some Consecrations. It's like, okay, you could probably hold those if you just happen to have those while Lore Master Cho is out. This helps so much in the control matchups. And again, like I said, this is not a deck where stats matter. You get this buffed a couple of times, up to a 2/6, a 3/7. This suddenly becomes a threat for 2 mana that, oh, by the way, your opponent has to kill this or they're screwed. This card single-handedly wins you the Freeze Mage matchup. Like, they have to deal with this. I already kind of explained Novice Engineer over Loot Hoarder. Like I said, synergy with Bran, much better to draw sooner than later. This is a deck that really needs cycle. You need to be drawing cards as much as possible. Some people are running the spells instead. The Paladin's got all kinds of options. You've got Divine Favor. You've got Solemn Vigil. You might as well just have the dude. You might as well have the body so that if you're buffing your hand, you're putting out something that's worthwhile. You put out a Novice Engineer, a 2-mana 3/3, well, suddenly you're getting some value in the earlier turns. Peacekeeper, obligatory. All these mid-range survival cards are obligatory. Horse Rider, I already talked about. Bran, totally obligatory. Wicker Flame, Raynad has talked a lot of shit on this. A bunch of the other streamers have said that they think it's good. I think it's amazing. I think it's your only chance in a lot of situations. It's really your only chance against aggro. You saw me earlier take out the Ooze in favor of Tyrion. I'm at the point with this deck where if you're going up against like a pirate warrior, like, just concede. Like, if you're, like, honestly, if you don't want to waste your time, you're gonna lose. You're gonna lose to the aggro shaman. You're gonna lose to these aggro rogue decks. You get the Who Goes There into I'm in charge, and it's just fucking over. Like, you're not gonna come back with this deck. And putting in things like Ooze and Doomsayer and whatever, you're just worsening your matchup against other classes. Just take the loss. You're playing a fun low tier. Fuck it. But in the event that you do sort of stand a chance against the aggro, it's cards like this where you get this guy buffed up a couple times, you put him out, really can keep you alive. You get in a couple hits, people are throwing their minions at it to get through, it starts to heal you up. When I beat Aggro Warrior, this is the card that gets it done. Argus, people start to see you putting out big dudes, and they're just going to go at your face. Argus stops that from happening. Plus, you get another 1/1 buff, so Argus can be used with an unbuffed Mean Street Marshal. Keeper, totally mandatory. Grime Street Enforcer, obviously mandatory, like, that's the deck. Second-rate bruisers are excellent in this meta. Very, very strong when your opponent, even these priests, man, they start to put 2 or 3 dudes on the deck right away, this is the kind of card that's gonna save you. And you get this guy buffed up, very serious business. Fight Promoter, in my opinion, completely mandatory, very, very powerful. You get this out with Bran, draw 4 cards from that. I'm almost always drawing at least 2. Very rarely is this dead in my hand. By the time it comes to the point in the game where you're ready to play this, you're gonna have something on the field with 7 health, or 6, I mean. Dawn, I think it's really good, obviously, like who could even argue? If you think the curve is a little too strong, some of these other bigger dudes I would rather have over Don Honcho. Grime Street Protector, this is kind of one of those fun cards that I'm screwing around with right now. This is kind of a leftover from when I was playing Sogarth. If you're going to play something big just for the taunt, then with Noggenfogger, it has really good synergy because things are clashing into each other all the time. Probably better to get something else instead of this Grime Street Protector. Probably better to go for the super value. There he is, Doppelgangster. I think running 2 of this is a big mistake. I was doing that for a while. This card, Doppelgangster, is just too slow. It is so high value, but it is just too slow because, again, it doesn't have taunt. And by the time you're ready to put it out, yeah, you get those games where you get it buffed up and they don't get a board, and on turn 5 you put out a bunch of 5/5s. That happens, but it also usually happens against a deck that can deal with it, like Warlock, where they're just gonna fucking swallow it up in the void, or someone's gonna drop a potion and do 5 damage to it. So I just was not getting a lot of value out of this card. I don't know. If you really think that you need more value in this deck, you could go with the Doppelgangster. There might be something else. Maybe you think more card draw, whatever. Light Lord, in my opinion, totally mandatory. Again, because this is around the turn when you start to die. And you put this guy out, that extra 8 health, along with an 8/8 or better body, will completely keep you in the game. Tyrion, I was pissed off at my friend Tyrion here because it felt like the kind of card that I was putting out on turn 8 and it was just getting swallowed up by something, and then I was dying by people going to the face. Yeah, keep them. Keep these high value, mid-rangey cards. And then finally, Mayor Noggenfogger. So thank you for making it to the end of my video. I realized I didn't have an ending. There's not going to be any footage in this video, but I'm going to make a video where I play the deck, and it's going to have all my MLG hype editing as always. So thank you so much. I hope you guys give it a shot and have fun with it.